Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Jody.
And we're in Jody's backyard.
No, we're in my backyard.
Oh, right.
Oh, you said my backyard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we are in my backyard with bees. And we're going to be going into the beehives today and taking a look at the different things that you're going to see. You're going to see worker bees, drones, queens, queens are female.
Queens are female.
Drones are
male.
And worker bees are infertile.
Female.
Yes. So sometimes the worker bees will lay eggs, but mostly it's the queen that lays all of the eggs. So we're going to be finding a lot of things going on. I know that we have some queen cells, and that's not because the bees are going to swarm, but it's because I took the queen out a couple of days ago, and the queens have laid eggs, and if the eggs are 3 days old or younger, the worker bees will start feeding them royal jelly, and
that will change their morphology. It's fascinating.
Yes, yeah.
What happens is the worker bees start feeding these young larvae a different kind of food, basically, and that changes it. Changes all of their development from that point on. It makes it so that those larvae are going to then develop functioning ovaries and other things that they need to be a queen bee, which they wouldn't normally do, but because Jody removed the queen, that's what has happened within the hive.
Right. And in some of the hives, we're going to see 2 or 3 queen cells, because what they do is everything that I think bees do are things that they do because they're overachievers. They do everything big.
They like to work hard.
Right. And they don't want to have problems. So they anticipate and they look towards the future.
Now, one of the things I'm curious about right here is that there's a hive behind you that I've never seen this kind before. I've certainly heard of them. What are they called?
Top bar hives.
Wait, say this again?
It's a top bar hive.
Okay.
And they sometimes will call them African top bars because a lot of them started over in Africa.
And is this because there is a bar on the top? Is that why they're called this?
Pretty much. They have bars that are horizontal instead of vertical, like in the Langstroth hives.
Oh, I see.
Lorenzo Langstroth was the originator of the typical hives that you see. But the top bar hives, pretty much you can build them out of anything you want, any size you want. What they're going to do is the bees are going to draw a comb out on their own. You'll see some frames that I started off this hive with, but they will draw out the comb all on their own, and it'll look like a bell. Kind of like a bell curve.
So instead of what we're used to seeing as these boxes in people's yards all around the Monadnock region as being the typical beehive, these are starting to be a little more popular.
Yeah.
And they have a different shape entirely.
Right,
okay.
Right. And the benefits of these styles is that most of them come with a window. So when you take off the window, you can see what's going on in the hive. You can't see a flat view, but what you can see is how far they have built. So as you're looking at this, these are some frames that I put in there to start. But what we'll see over here are comb that has been drawn out specifically by the bees, and they have had no help from us. So the other section here will have frames that are just the top bar.
And they can build on that.
And they can build on that.
Okay.
So, and that's what we're hoping for in this. They've got a long ways to go, but they're doing really well, and this is a beautiful hive. All of the hives here are really doing well. It's the beginning of July. There's lots of nectar and pollen out there, and the bees are just really busy.
Great.
Yep. All right, so we have suited up, and we're getting ready to go into the hives. We're going to go into 3 or 4 hives today so that you can have an idea of what you would see in the hives. If you are interested in learning more about beekeeping, I would contact your local beekeeping club, or you can email us and we can give you some information as to where you might find a club that would be teaching lessons and things like that. Jenna has gone into the hive several times with me, so she knows quite a bit about bees, but she may have some questions along the way.
I'm definitely still a beginner, and I'd love to someday become a beekeeper myself, but for now, I'm learning alongside Jody, who has been a beekeeper for years.
Yes. And there's other people that have been beekeepers for 30, 40, 50 years. Those are the kind of people that you want to be around, because those are great mentors. They've been through a lot, and they've seen a lot of changes. Even in the 10 or so years that I've been a beekeeper, I've seen a lot of changes.
So what is this that you have behind you? We've got a smoker going, and the smoke, I have learned from Jody that the smoke inside the smoker, basically there's pine needles in here that she lit on fire, and then you have the little bellows in the back that really gets that smoke going.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And what this does is it calms the bees. We're not exactly sure why and what the reasoning is behind that, but it calms the bees down so that, and they sort of like tuck into the hive and aren't quite so active when you get the smoke on them.
Yeah. They also sometimes feel like there's like a forest fire. So they kind of focus on other things besides us. So that's another reason.
That's
that we use
another
the
reason.
smoke. Yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to smoke this hive just a little bit. Now, we try not to smoke the hive any more than we need to because you know what it was like to just breathe that smoke.
Right.
That's what they're going through. So what we do is we just let them know that we're here, and then we go inside and do what we're going to do. We're going to go very gently. I'm not going to use a lot of hand motion, and we're going to go into the hive and see what we find.
Great.
So what we're going to do is we start off by smoking the front, just letting them know there's a little opening at the front, letting them know that we're coming in. That didn't really go into the hive a whole lot. And then we're going to open the top cover and let them know that we're coming in. I take off the top cover and put that down on the ground because what we're going to do is we're going to put, there's a little bit of bees in there. We're going to take these hive bodies and put them on that just because we're trying to get down to this hive body here. This top one is not going to have a whole lot going on. We just put this on the other day, and that snap that you heard is something that they use. They have this stuff called propolis, and it's a bee glue that they use to tighten up any kinds of holes or openings in the hive. So I'm just going to set this to the side. These frames here, I will take a quick look at. There is some really beautiful comb being drawn here. I'm only going into these in the center first, just because there's not a lot of bees here. I wouldn't do this in a really active hive, but I want to show you the work that the bees do when they're in the hive. When we started this hive off, we started it with these frames. These are, looks like shallow frames. Shallow is the size, the depth of them.
So if it was a deep frame, it would be longer this way,
Right,
right?
that's what we're going to see when we go into the bottom.
Okay.
These cells, all of this wax, has been drawn out by the bees. They have glands on the sides of their bodies that produce wax during a nectar flow. And I thought I could just hear some bees making a little noise. But what they've done is they've drawn out these comb cells, and this part here is actually brood. And that means that the queen has been up in this section, and she's starting to lay eggs. And if you look really close...
And how can you tell that it's
it's so
brood instead of capped honey?
Okay, I'll show you when we get in closer because you'll see a different coloring.
So it's the coloring of the top that's covering it that tells you. Okay.
This has more of a dull look, and the honey has more of a shiny, waxy coating on it.
Okay, so what are all these bees doing up here now?
They are going to take care of these cells, and they're also feeding these larvae. If you
There's
are
larvae.
Able to, yeah. If you can get in here close, I'm not sure how close, and let the sun come on them, you can see all of those larvae in there. Can you see those, Lee? The white things that look like little bugs right in the deep part of the cells? Yeah. Okay, that's what we're looking for. And we don't see the queen on here right yet, but what these guys are going to do is take care of those eggs and larvae.
So
and
they're
going to cap them over just like this, and then they're going to be in the cells for a total of 21 days.
Now, just to talk a little bit about the biology of a honeybee, the queen comes and lays the egg, and then the workers, once that egg hatches and is a larva, the workers come and feed it.
Right.
What are the workers feeding those larvae?
Yep, we call it bee bread, and what it is, it's a mixture of pollen, which is that yellow stuff that you see on the flowers, and nectar. That's what they feed the worker bees. It's totally different than what they feed the queen.
So in these that are going to be workers, they're getting bee bread.
Right.
And then once that larva has gone through all of its stages of development, then it goes into its pupa, and that's when the bees cap it, right?
Right.
Okay, so then after that, it's in its cocoon or pupa stage, and then the bees cap it, and then the next thing that will come out from that is you'll actually see the adult bee in a week or so coming out of it, correct?
After like 21 days, it takes approximately for the...
In the pupa?
In the entire stage from egg to adulthood.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can see, well, you can kind of see the bees coming out. This is where the bees are located in the hive right now. They're usually towards the center, and that would be sort of like the nucleus of the hive. So there'll be a lot of bees in this section here, and then they'll draw out the comb on these edges, and soon this will completely be filled.
So in the center, you're going to have more comb drawn out. Then eventually you'll get the edges drawn out. And then would you need to put another hive box on?
Right, and that's what we had, just in case. Because we don't want them to swarm, although swarming is a natural tendency for bees, we don't want them to swarm because that takes away half of our bees and puts us behind. Because the queen will have laid an egg, she will have, the other bees will have fertilized it to make another queen, and she will fly off. But that still means that half of the bees
We'll go with
approximately
her.
will fly off. Yes.
So a swarm is, if they feel crowded, then their natural instinct is to go
Right.
find a new home with half the bees.
Right.
Okay.
Because what they're trying to do is increase the population of bees. They just want to continue to build their species.
So if you keep giving them space, then they won't feel crowded and they won't swarm.
In a perfect world.
In a perfect world.
Yes. So now what we have is a few more bees. This is really the brood area. That other frame is going to be brood as well, but this is where most of the action has taken place so far. I believe we're going to find queen cells in here. It's just a matter of where we're going to find them. And again, most of the activity is going to be going on right in here. I'm going to give you this little pointer. And when we do find certain things, I'll have you point to them so that we can see them on the...
So one thing I noticed, and I don't know if we can see this on camera at all, one thing I noticed before you go into it is that there's actually a lot of comb in funny places to my beginner eye. I would think that there wouldn't be, you know, along the edge here, there are little cells. And is that because they were, you know, they just draw it where they can, any space they'll fill?
Bees are going to do what the bees want to do.
Okay.
And it's hard to understand exactly what they do because it doesn't look like there's any more space here than over here, but they will fill up spaces where they feel are too large or if they need to have things closed up a little bit.
Okay, so that's just what they're doing. That's their nature to do that. There's a
Right.
little bit of, there's some honeycomb here
Yep.
between, so that
But that's
when
really
you-
nothing compared to what you might see in a few of the other hives.
so when you go into this, that'll break and we'll pull it out.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So what we do is when we start with these bees here, we're going to start with the hive frames that are the least active because these bees don't really want to be interrupted. They've got a job to do, and we really want them to be doing their job. So I'm just going to open this up a little bit.
So is that a special tool that you can buy just for
It's-
working in beehives?
It pretty much is. I'm sure that it might be used for something else, but this is a great hive tool for prying things up. As the hives get older and stickier, it makes it much easier to be able to lift things out. And what I'm trying to do is not make any more motion than I have to so that I don't interrupt these guys. We just don't want them to know that we're in here at all, hardly. Okay, so what we see here is brood like we saw in the other one. It's a little darker because it's a little darker comb.
So all of this in here is the brood.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. And then you see honey on the outside, that shiny
This
stuff.
lighter,
that is-
shinier stuff?
Yep,
Okay.
that's all capped honey. So that will stay for quite a while until they need it. And then I'll just show you, these are, I don't know if you can get to these in the photographs, but I'm going to try to find a drone. I just saw one here a minute ago. It was a big fat one.
So the way that you can tell drones apart, so drone again is the male bee,
Right, this is a drone right here.
and they're larger.
They're rounder, more roly-poly.
And is this
And
one
here's-
here,
this
right
one
here?
here is a drone.
What about right here? See it?
That would be a drone.
Okay.
Yep. And you can see he's a little bit bigger. These are worker bees. You can see that they're a little bit more dainty. Look, oh, that one I thought. Yep. So I don't see any bees. Oh, there's one that a honeybee may be coming out soon. It's either being capped over or the bee is coming out. Now I'll turn it over to the other side. And we're looking for the queen here as well while we're taking a glance at these.
And how would you know her? She's larger as well,
She is
right?
much larger. I don't expect to see her for a while because this isn't really the center of the hive.
And you tell a queen from a drone because she has a longer abdomen?
And you'll definitely, she's got more like a pointed abdomen. Here you can see a bee that has pollen on its pollen baskets. Here's another drone.
Here's
here.
another actually with pollen baskets right here. You might be able to
Yep,
see on
and
camera.
he's actually, she is actually in the cell, probably cleaning it or bringing back some nectar, putting it in the cell because they need the nectar and the pollen, but just not quite as a high, or like royal jelly content for the worker bees. Okay, so this one here, we're gonna put back in.
And just for those of you
Actually,
who
I'm
are
gonna leave it out because I need a little bit more space.
those of you who are watching that don't know maybe what a pollen basket is, the pollen baskets are on the back legs of the bee, and they're a sort of a flattened area right on the bee's leg where they can put, where they can store a lot of pollen to carry it back to the hive.
Right. And there's a static electricity that the bees have that attracts the
Pollen grains
to the hair. So that's all over their bodies. So I'm just going to spray these guys just a little bit, just to give us a little bit of space so that we're not going to bother any of these guys. I am looking for some queen cells, so we're going to go in a couple more frames because we don't need to go to every single frame.
Now tell me again why it would be a benefit for them to produce more queens.
Because you never know how many queens are going to survive. And what the queen has to do is it has to be born and go out on a maiden flight, a mating flight, and be fertilized by males, which are the drones.
And would she then come back? Would she come back to this hive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's what our hope is.
So this is all brood here.
This is a beautiful pattern of brood.
And then we've got honey here and honey here.
And the part that you see that's kind of empty in between is where they would have had pollen, or they'll be packing it full of more pollen, so that in future times when they're going to put more feed into the cells, that the queen will have food there. Or the worker bees will have food there for the bees. Again, I don't see the queen yet. I'm just going to keep going. And Lee, I know we're going to find a queen this time. These are all, I've gone into these hives and I've seen queens in all of these. It's just a matter of finding where she is. And she should be in one of these next 2 frames. Unless there's no queen and there's just queen cells. Okay, there's a queen cell.
Right here.
You want to look inside and see if there's anything in there?
It is empty.
Okay, so that either means that they haven't laid a queen cell or queen egg in there, or they maybe decided that they didn't want to after the fact.
How can you tell that she didn't just emerge?
It should be longer.
Oh, I see. It would take longer?
Yeah, but you know, it's really hard to tell. I think anyway. Maybe I'm just too much of a novice, but it's hard to say unless you see a capped cell, whether it's the before or after.
Right.
And I'm going to just go into one more frame. And if we don't find the queen, it's not a big deal because she is doing an excellent job. And I know she's there, and we really don't want to interrupt her anyway. But I want to show you some drone cells. Okay. These bumpy cells that you see at the bottom here.
Out here.
Yep. Those are drone cells. They're a little bit bigger.
Up here as well?
Yep. Those are drone cells as well. And so
look, there's somebody coming out right here. I don't know if you can see it on camera.
Yep, right there.
Right here
there.
And right here.
Yep.
So this is...
Let me just put this down so that maybe Lee can get in there.
So they're right down here. I'll keep my pointer there. And so she is emerging. She has changed from a larva. She's gone through her pupal stage, and she's coming out as an adult female. And again, this will be a worker. You can tell by the size of the cell that that's a worker coming out. These, again, are the drones because they're larger, drone cells.
Right.
So that's always neat to see them coming out.
And, you know, I can't tell you how long it's going to take, but it would be kind of neat to be able to watch it. I just don't want to spend a whole lot of time
Right, we don't know.
with her, but it is really interesting. We'll check back on that in just a minute. So this side here is where there's a lot of adult bees that had emerged, and that's probably why on the other side you saw that other bee emerging. Because
oh, what is this? Is this the queen?
That is the queen! Good eye, Jenna!
Thank you. Right here.
Let me get it so that Lee can see it, because I know she likes to run around a lot. She's right on top. She's right here.
Right here.
That is the queen. She doesn't like light, and she's not happy that we're doing this. So as you can see, she went to the dark area.
But she has a much pointier abdomen.
Yes. Yep. And there she does. She's come out again.
Which one is she?
She
Right
is
there.
here.
And she's kind of moving across. It's kind of nice that she's given you some space and not all around the other bees so you can see her. She's a beautiful queen.
And so how many eggs will she lay a day on the average?
there's a lot of different theories, but anywhere between 1,500 and 2,500 eggs. So
That's a lot of eggs.
That's a lot of eggs. So I'm gonna put her back in, and we're gonna close this hive up because we've seen a queen cell, we've seen the queen, we've seen the drone cells, and as you can see, these guys have been really quiet. As long as you don't knock them or let them, really know that you're in the hive, they're not really going to bother you. It all depends on the time of year too, though, because as fall comes along, they're going to be very protective of their hive and saving a lot more honey.
So this is a time of year when they're basically working.
Right.
And they're not going to pay a lot of attention.
Right.
Okay.
And also the other thing, for these guys is that the sun hasn't come out and warmed the hive yet. So they're not really flying a whole lot.
So if they're not in the direct sun, they're not flying as much.
Right. It needs to be 50 degrees. And I know that it's 50 degrees outside right now for us, but it needs to be nice and warm for them to start flying. So what I'm going to do, I got somebody's attention. So we're going to put those other frames back on. And this is kind of pretty here too. I don't know if you can see this, Lee. Just the bees are hanging out. This is what they would do. They're just trying to keep everything warm and trying to figure out what their next action is going to be. So these are probably some of the younger bees. They haven't started going out on their flights, their foraging flights yet. So we're trying not to kill any more bees than we can, put everything back exactly the way we took it off. And we'll go into another hive.
So we close the window and now we're going to lift off the lid.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to lift it straight up. Okay, and we're going to just put it off to the side. This hive is a little bit different. It's a little bit of a prototype. What we've done is we've used deep frames in this hive body. A lot of times top bar hives will be different sizes so that when you put your bees in, you can't start with like a nuke box. A nuke box is something that looks like this over here. It holds 5 frames and it has a queen bee and eggs and honey all ready in process. So when we order bees, if we need to order them, and we get a nuke box, in a regular typical hive, the typical top bar hives usually have an angle on them. So you couldn't use a deep frame such as something like this. This is a deep frame. It's not a very pretty one, but it's a deep frame. So you couldn't use this kind of a frame because there's an angle in the top bar hives. But in this case, because we've brought it down straight, we can use this style hive frame, and you'll see that in just a minute. So we are going to smoke them. Their opening is on the other side, and we're working the bees from the back, which is usually what we try to do, so we don't harm the bees or alert them any more than we need to. If you want to give 3 smokes right down there, you'll see the holes in the hive. Okay. Now this one, because we have the deep frames in it, there's a little bit more spacing. These are the bars that are in there for the typical top bar. And as you will see, they have a little ridge on them. And this is where we're hoping that the bees will draw out the comb. Oh, we're going to put this back on because we don't really want them flying around a whole lot right yet. But that's what a frame looks like for the top bar. You can see, again, the difference between that frame and this frame is there's a little bit of space on the sides here. So the bees can actually come up through and up to the top. We don't really want that happening on this top bar hive. So what we do is we put an inner cover on, in this case, and I put a screen over it so that the bees couldn't come up and out. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Because this is going to be a really active hive.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to smoke this just a little bit, let them know that we're coming in. We don't want to have fire bursting out, but we're trying to get a good smoke. That nice thick smoke is what we're looking for. So I'm going to smoke it.
You can hear them.
Right. And I'm going to pop this top off as gently as I can. It fits very snugly.
And did they put some propolis in there as well, probably?
Not quite. You know, this one's not too bad, but this was brand new about a month ago, and you can see this is the propolis.
Okay.
So they are trying to glue a few things, but it's all normal. These are beautiful bees. These are a little bit darker than the other ones that we looked at. These are some northern raised bees. We're trying to do more northern raised in the area, just because when we get bees from Georgia, they're not acclimated to our climate. So we're trying to get bees that will survive up here.
So you buy these from someone?
If you don't have bees already.
Okay.
Yep. Or you can find a beekeeper that has bees that is willing to give you 3 to 5 frames or charge you for them. Okay, so these guys are going to be pretty active. I mean, not bad. I'm not trying to scare us, but they are going to be active. We're going to start where we have some frames that they haven't drawn out on yet. And we'll go in and see where they start. Now these frames, they haven't done anything on, but it's all a good thing. This is a little chain that they'll make because they do want to draw out some comb. They just haven't gotten it started yet. Sometimes that'll be several bees long.
A chain of several bees?
Mm-hmm. Because what they're doing is they're kind of like I don't know, scaffolding kind of. They're making their own scaffolding.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Okay, so these are the frames over here that we want to get to, but I'm just going to go through these first beforehand. I'm not going to look at all of these because these are just frames that have either nectar or brood on them, but there's some other frames that I'd really like to get to.
So now these have changed. They're not the top bar, they're a full hive body. Is that what we call it?
But it's a deep hive body.
Okay.
These frames here.
That's what you
these
started
6
with.
Frames, yeah.
Okay.
What I did is I started with these frames just because I had them and I had it as a nuke. Again, just
so
like
you
that
could
little box.
so you could put it right in here and get it going.
Right.
Okay.
And that's again what we're hoping for is that we can transfer them, because a lot of times they'll say in the top bars that you can't use the deep frames that you'd usually get with a nuke hive. You can also buy a package of bees, which is very easy to put in to the hive as well. So this one here is a really funky frame, and it is a frame that has the wood around it. It's quite heavy and quite filled with honey, but it is beautiful.
Wow, that is a lot of honey.
That's all honey.
You can see it
here.
oozing out right here.
Yep, and that's because it was attached to the other hive body. Now on these frames, I don't worry quite so much if they're wobbly or wavy, because this is a top bar and this is like more natural, stress-free kind of hive. So I don't mind if they're like this, as long as I can pull the frames out when I need to check them. And that's one of the things that as Americans or people in the United States, we need to be able to pull the frames out so we can check to see if there is any kind of a disease or anything that we need to be looking at in order to prevent other problems.
Do we need to check that more than others?
Well, it's just the standards that the United States
we have certain standards,
right.
I
so
see, okay.
There's a skip basket you can't use. You have to have something that the frames can be pulled out
Okay,
on.
and that is regulations here.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Now is this shiny down here, is that nectar?
It is.
Okay.
And that will be capped over, and pretty soon this whole frame will be honey. Now, the month of July is pretty good in the very beginning, but then there's a little bit of a dearth, which means there's not a lot of nectar. So these guys want to have lots of honey in the hive before we get to that point.
I see.
Otherwise, we might have to feed them sugar water, and that's not something that we'd rather do. We'd rather have them just eat their regular honey as the adults' food. So let me check the other side. This one doesn't have quite so much honey, but it is still pretty. There's quite a few drones on there. Those are all normal. That's a good thing.
Is this a drone here?
That's a drone. Right next to it is a drone. There's several
Now what's
drones.
dripping down? Is that all honey?
Probably. It's probably nectar, actually.
Nectar.
Yep. So we'll get that one back in the hive because we're really looking to move a little bit further over. And if we find the queen, we find her. If we don't, we don't. That's not a big deal. Really what I want to do is I want to get over to where they've drawn out the comb on their own. Okay, so here we are again with some nice smoke. And that masks our scent as well. so I'm going to move these two frames together just because we're trying to get to this next section, and then the section after that is really what we're looking for. So this frame here is one that they drew out. This is on the top bar frame. This is one that they drew out all totally on their own. There's no frame on the bottom, so you have to be very careful when you pick it up. If you picked it up and it was a really warm day or fresh comb and you picked it up on an angle, it could drop right off, and that would make your heart drop. Because when you think of it, it's all that work that the bees did, not
for
a pretty
nothing,
sight.
right?
Yeah, it's just really sad because they work so hard. So we're going to look at this one, and then the next one is the one that we're really looking for. So this one here is completely drawn by the bees.
So you can see there's no wood around the outside like on the other ones.
Mm-hmm. And I don't see a queen on this side. Do you see a queen on that side, Jenna, by any chance?
I don't.
Okay, and that's totally fine. There's mostly nectar on this one. And again, when their bees are in the hive, they will have the brood towards the middle and the food on the outsides.
Are these very heavy?
They're not too bad. They're not filled with honey yet. Okay, let me tell you what just happened. In a top bar, the wax will go to the edge of the
Box.
This one was stuck to the edge and I pulled it off, so now we have honeycomb. Beautiful honeycomb, but it's not going to be very easy for them because we're going to have to take it out. It's okay, we have honeycomb now at least, but...
So it basically came off of the frame?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is okay, it just means that it's some honeycomb for us. So Jenna, I'm going to have you hold that. Okay, 2 hands, if you can. And hold it as straight as possible because we don't want that to fall off. This is where the comb broke off, and you can see the honey dripping from it. Oh, I hate to do this. Not because it's so beautiful and so much work that they just did.
What would happen if you left it in there?
It would just make a mess for me, and then I'd have to go in and clean it off, and it would be a pain.
So then do I put this back in?
Yes, you may. So as you can see, this is honeycomb. They're not really happy that we did this, but they will go back. It's all filled with honey. And this is actually what people love, is honeycomb. You can buy it in a
container.
Like
I've seen it.
Square
Yep.
boxes or circular boxes. And we're just going to get all these bees off. I can feel them just flying like crazy.